The bank manager stammered an apology as 7-year-old Zora Johnson stood confidently beside her father, whose net worth of $4 billion had just been revealed. 3 hours earlier, these same people had mocked her, called security, and accused her of stealing the platinum card. Before we dive into this incredible story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever witnessed someone being terribly misjudged based on appearances. Now let's rewind to see how this powerful moment came to be. The morning sun streamed through the bay windows of the Johnson family home in Atlanta, casting golden light across the breakfast nook where 7-year-old Zora sat with her father Marcus. Unlike the palatial mansions that most billionaires called home, the Johnsons lived in a modest 5-bedroom house in a middle-class neighborhood. Their kitchen, while equipped with top-of-the-line appliances, looked ordinary at first glance. This was by design. Marcus Johnson, founder and CEO of SecureNet Global, one of the world's leading cybersecurity firms, had always valued privacy over opulence. With a net worth of over $4 billion, Marcus could have afforded any luxury, but he chose to raise his daughter away from the spotlight. "Daddy, is this right?" Zora asked, pushing her notebook across the table. Marcus adjusted his reading glasses and examined her work. She had been calculating compound interest on an imaginary investment of $10,000 over 20 years. "Almost perfect, Butterfly," he said with a proud smile. "Just check your decimal placement in step 3. Zora's brow furrowed in concentration as she found her mistake. At 7 years old, she demonstrated an understanding of financial concepts that most adults struggled to grasp. This was no accident. Since she was 4, Marcus had been teaching her about money management investments and financial literacy. "There, fixed it," she announced triumphantly, her dark eyes sparkling with intelligence and determination. "The final amount is $26,533.76. Marcus nodded approvingly. "That's my girl." He glanced at his watch and sighed. "I need to make some calls before my meeting." "Finish your breakfast, okay?" As Marcus stepped into his home office, his phone rang. Zora could hear the tension in his voice as he spoke. Something was wrong. She quietly approached the partially open door, clutching her beloved teddy bear, Professor Einstein. The plush toy, worn from years of love, went everywhere with her. What most people didn't know was that inside the stuffed animal, Marcus had installed a small recording device. After an incident at Zora's preschool, where a teacher had made racist remarks, Marcus had given her the modified teddy bear as a means of protection. "It's not about spying," he had explained. "It's about having evidence if anyone ever treats you unfairly again." Now, as Zora listened, she could tell her father was stressed. "The acquisition is happening today. I thought we had until next week," Marcus said. "The wire needs to be completed by noon, or we lose the deal. That's in 3 hours. Zora watched as her father paced the room, then suddenly stopped and stared at his phone in frustration. "Something's wrong with my banking app. It keeps crashing," he muttered. After several more attempts, Marcus slammed his phone down. "I need to get to that emergency board meeting, but this transfer has to happen today." For a moment he seemed lost in thought. Then his eyes landed on Zora standing in the doorway. His expression softened. "Butterfly, come here. I need your help with something important." Zora stepped forward, clutching Professor Einstein tighter. "What is it, Daddy?" Marcus knelt to her level, his face serious but calm. "I need to send $6 million to a company called Quantum Innovations before noon today. My phone isn't working and I have an emergency meeting I can't miss. I need you to go to the bank for me." Zora's eyes widened. This was a big responsibility even for her. Marcus continued, "Thomas will drive you to Piedmont National Bank downtown. You'll need to speak with someone there and complete the wire transfer using my card." He reached into his wallet and pulled out a sleek black platinum card. "This is a very important task, Butterfly. The people at the bank know me. Just tell them you're my daughter and that I sent you to complete a wire transfer. Can you do that for me?" Zora nodded solemnly, taking the card with reverence. "I can do it, Daddy." Marcus smiled and handed her a folded paper with all the transfer details. "Memorize this information just like we practiced with your schoolwork. The account number, the routing number, and the company name." As Zora studied the paper, Marcus added, "The bank staff all know me. Miss Catherine has helped me many times. Ask for her if you have any trouble." What Marcus didn't say was how rarely he visited this particular branch in person. His banking was typically handled through private channels or by his financial team. But today was different. The emergency board meeting couldn't be postponed, and the banking app's malfunction left few options. Thomas, their driver for the past 5 years, appeared in the doorway. A tall, dignified man in his 60s, Thomas had worked for Marcus since before Zora was born. Recently, he had injured his knee, making it difficult for him to walk long distances. "The car is ready, sir," he announced. Marcus helped Zora into her light jacket. "Remember everything I taught you about standing up for yourself," he said quietly. "You're just as important as anyone else in that bank, no matter what they might think when they see you." Zora nodded, understanding the subtext of his words. Even at 7, she was beginning to recognize the different ways people treated her because of her skin color. "I'll make you proud, Daddy," she promised. Marcus hugged her tightly. "You already do, Butterfly. Every single day." As they parted ways in the driveway, Marcus heading to his meeting in a town car while Zora climbed into the family's modest sedan with Thomas, neither could have predicted the storm that was about to unfold. Thomas adjusted the rearview mirror to catch a glimpse of Zora in the back seat. She sat straight-backed and serious, her small fingers, tracing the embossed numbers on her father's platinum card. Professor Einstein was secured in the seatbelt beside her. "You feeling okay about this?" Miss Zora Thomas asked, navigating the Atlanta morning traffic. Despite the Johnson family's enormous wealth, they drove a standard Honda Accord. Marcus believed flashy cars attracted unnecessary attention. "I'm okay," Zora replied, though her voice had a slight tremor. "Daddy's counting on me." Thomas nodded approvingly. "That he is. And you know what? You're the perfect person for this job." He turned onto Peachtree Street, the skyscrapers of downtown Atlanta rising before them. "You remember the account password your father told you," Zora nodded. "And the security questions?" Another nod. "Good girl." They drove in silence for a moment before Thomas spoke again. "You know, when I was about twice your age, I went into a bank to open my first account. Had saved up $400 from mowing lawns all summer." Zora listened attentively. She loved Thomas's stories. "The teller took one look at me and said they required a minimum of $500 to open an account. I knew that wasn't true because my white friend had opened one the week before with just $50. Thomas's voice remained even, but Zora could hear the old pain beneath his words. "What did you do?" she asked. "I went to 3 more banks that day. Got the same story at each one. Finally found a small credit union that would take my money." He paused at a red light and turned to look at her directly. "Things are different now, but not as different as they should be. People will make assumptions about you the minute you walk through those doors." Zora clutched Professor Einstein tighter. "Because I'm black," Thomas nodded sadly. "That, and because you're young. They won't expect you to be smart or capable. They certainly won't expect you to be the daughter of one of the richest men in America." He smiled at her through the mirror. "But you know what? Their surprise will be their problem, not yours. You just remember who you are." Zora straightened her shoulders. "I'm Zora Johnson. My daddy says I'm the smartest girl in Atlanta." Thomas chuckled. "That you are." As they approached the financial district, Thomas explained why Marcus kept their wealth so private. "Your father grew up with nothing, Miss Zora. When he started making real money, he saw how differently people treated him. Some wanted handouts, others tried to scam him, and many who'd ignored him before suddenly wanted to be his best friend. He decided then that he'd keep his success quiet and focus on raising you with your feet on the ground." The imposing structure of Piedmont National Bank came into view. The neoclassical building stood 12 stories tall. Its marble facade gleaming in the morning Sunday, Zora felt a flutter of anxiety in her stomach. "It looks so big," she whispered. Thomas pulled to the curb across from the main entrance. "Now listen carefully, Miss Zora. I'd come in with you, but with my knee the way it is, I wouldn't be much help on all those stairs and walking those marble floors." He pointed to his swollen knee. "I'll be right here if you need me. Just call my cell phone if there's any problem at all." Zora nodded, memorizing his number in her head as he recited it. Thomas reached back and straightened the collar of her simple blue dress. Despite her father's wealth, Zora dressed like any other 7-year-old. Today, she wore a navy dress with white sneakers, her curly black hair pulled back with a matching headband. Nothing about her appearance hinted at her family's fortune. "You go show them what Zora Johnson is made of," Thomas encouraged her with a wink. Zora took a deep breath, tucked the platinum card securely into the small purse her father had given her, and clutched Professor Einstein to her chest. As she crossed the street toward the bank, she felt dozens of eyes on her. Adults in business attire hurried past, some glancing curiously at the small black girl walking alone. A security guard at the entrance gave her a suspicious look, but didn't stop her as she walked through the revolving doors into the grand lobby of Piedmont National Bank. The interior was even more intimidating than the exterior. Marble floors stretched in every direction, the ceiling soared 3 stories overhead, and crystal chandeliers cast prismatic patterns across the walls. Men and women in expensive suits moved purposefully through the space, their heels clicking against the polished floor. Teller windows lined one wall, while glass-walled offices occupied another. In the center, a large, circular desk served as the customer service hub. Zora took in the scene, noting that she was the only child present. In fact, she realized with a sinking feeling she was the only black person in the entire lobby. Several customers waiting in various lines turned to stare at her. An older white woman in a fur coat deliberately pulled her designer purse closer to her body as Zora passed. A middle-aged man in a suit whispered something to his companion, and they both chuckled while looking directly at her. Zora clutched Professor Einstein tighter, drawing strength from the familiar comfort of her stuffed companion. "Just remember who you are," she whispered to herself, echoing Thomas's words. With determination in every step, she approached the circular desk in the center of the lobby where a blonde woman was typing on a computer. Zora had to stand on her tiptoes to see over the high counter. "Excuse me," she said politely. "I need to make a wire transfer for my father, please." The woman behind the desk didn't even look up. "The children's play area is in the corner by the restroom, sweetie," she said dismissively. Zora took a deep breath. "I'm not looking for the play area. I need to make a wire transfer for my father, Marcus Johnson." The receptionist, whose nameplate read Amber, finally looked up from her computer. Her perfectly lined eyes widened, then narrowed as she took in the sight of Zora standing before her desk. "Where are your parents, honey?" she asked, her voice dripping with condescension. "My father is in a meeting," Zora replied evenly. "He sent me to complete a wire transfer." Amber's lips curved into an amused smile. She swiveled in her chair to catch the attention of another employee. "Hey, Melissa, come look at this." The other woman approached, her eyes immediately landing on Zora. "Aw, how cute. Are you playing banker today?" Zora felt her cheeks grow warm, but she remembered her father's words about standing tall. "I'm not playing. My father needs me to transfer $6 million to Quantum Innovations before noon today." Both women burst into laughter. Several customers turned to look, some smiling at what they perceived as an adorable child's imagination. $6 million, Amber repeated, wiping an imaginary tear from her eye. "Well, aren't you ambitious?" Zora reached into her small purse and produced the black platinum card. "My father gave me his card and all the information needed for the transfer." Amber's laughter faltered slightly as she eyed the card, but her skepticism remained firmly in place. "Sweetie, where did you get that? Did you take it from someone's wallet?" The accusation stung. "No. It belongs to my father, Marcus Johnson. He gave it to me." Amber exchanged a look with Melissa. "I think we need to figure out who this card actually belongs to," she said, her tone suggesting Zora was either lying or had stolen it. More customers had gathered nearby, watching the interaction with interest. Zora could hear their murmurs, some amused, others concerned. "Should someone call security?" a man in an expensive suit suggested loudly enough for Zora to hear. "I'd like to speak to a manager, please," Zora said, her voice clear, despite her growing discomfort. The phrase was one her father had taught her to use when facing difficult situations. Amber rolled her eyes. "Of course you would." She picked up a phone and dialed an extension. "Brandon, there's a situation at the front desk you might want to handle." She hung up and smiled thinly at Zora. "Someone will be with you shortly." Minutes later, a tall man with slicked-back hair and a navy suit approached. "I'm Brandon Wells, assistant manager." "What seems to be the problem?" Before Zora could speak, Amber interjected. "This little girl walked in alone, claiming she needs to transfer $6 million. She has this card, which I suspect she may have taken from someone." She held up the platinum card as if it were evidence in a trial. Brandon turned to Zora with an expression of exaggerated patience. "Hello there." "What's your name?" "Zora Johnson," she replied firmly. "My father is Marcus Johnson, and he sent me to make an important wire transfer for his business." Brandon knelt down to her level, his voice shifting to the tone adults often used with very young children. "That's a very grown-up errand, isn't it? Did you perhaps misunderstand what your daddy asked you to do today?" Zora shook her head. "No. The transfer needs to be completed before noon for a business acquisition." She used the technical terms her father had taught her, which only seemed to amuse Brandon further. "And where exactly did you get this card?" he asked, taking it from Amber. "I told you. My father gave it to me this morning. If you check the name, you'll see it says Marcus Johnson." Brandon examined the card, his eyebrows raising slightly at the Black Elite designation, but his skepticism remained. "These cards are extremely rare." "Are you sure you didn't find this somewhere?" A small crowd had gathered now, watching the exchange with varying degrees of interest and amusement. An elderly white woman in an expensive suit leaned toward her companion. "You know these kids nowadays, they'll say anything for attention." The comment was loud enough for Zora to hear, and she felt tears beginning to form. She blinked them back, remembering her father's lessons about dignity. "Please verify the card," she insisted. "Call my father if you need to confirm." Brandon sighed dramatically. "I think we should call security and have them help locate your parents." He made a subtle gesture toward a uniformed guard standing near the entrance. "I know exactly where my father is." Zora countered, her voice stronger now, despite the growing knot in her throat. "He's in an emergency board meeting for his company SecureNet Global. He sent me here because his banking app wasn't working, and this transfer can't wait." At the mention of the company name, Brandon's expression flickered briefly, but he quickly regained his condescending smile. SecureNet Global. The cybersecurity company. And your father is the owner. His tone made it clear he didn't believe her for a second. "He's the founder and CEO," Zora confirmed. Several people in the crowd chuckled. Brandon straightened up, no longer bothering to hide his dismissal. "I've been working at this branch for 8 years, and I can assure you, we don't have any Marcus Johnson, who's the CEO of a major corporation, banking with us." This was a lie, and Zora knew it. Her father had specifically mentioned that the bank staff knew him, though she was now realizing he might have overestimated his visibility at this branch. The security guard approached his hand, resting casually on his belt. "Everything okay over here?" he asked, his eyes immediately focusing on Zora with suspicion. "We have a young visitor who seems to be confused," Brandon explained, handing the platinum card to the guard. "Would you mind helping us locate her parents? She claims this belongs to her father." The guard examined the card, whistling low under his breath at the Black Elite designation. "These aren't common," he remarked. "Someone's probably looking for this." Zora felt panic rising in her chest. They weren't listening to her. Worse, they were treating her like a thief. She pulled out her cell phone, a simple model her father had given her for emergencies. "I'll call my dad right now," she said, dialing his number. The phone went straight to voicemail. Of course, he was in his board meeting. Next, she tried Thomas, but his phone also went unanswered. She later learned he'd stepped away to take an urgent call from her father about the meeting. With each failed attempt to reach help, the adults around her grew more convinced of their assumptions. The humiliation was becoming unbearable as more customers gathered to watch what they perceived as an amusing scene. Have you ever been in a situation where no one would believe you despite telling the absolute truth? Comment number 1 if you felt the sting of being dismissed based on your appearance. Hit that like button if you think what these bank employees are doing is completely unacceptable. This story shows how quickly assumptions are made based on race and age, but what do you think will happen when they discover who Zora's father really is? Keep watching to find out how this shocking situation unfolds. The security guard, whose badge read Officer Wilson, positioned himself uncomfortably close to Zora. "Young lady, Why don't we go sit in the waiting area while we sort this out?" His tone wasn't exactly threatening, but there was an unmistakable authority in his voice that made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Zora clutched Professor Einstein tighter as she felt the walls closing in around her. The crowd of onlookers had grown, with several customers openly staring and whispering. An elderly white woman in a pearl necklace and designer suit spoke loudly to no one in particular. "I wonder which household she works for," the woman mused, her voice carrying across the marble lobby. "She probably took that card from her mother's employer while cleaning their house." The casual racism of the assumption sent a wave of shock through Zora's small body. She'd experienced prejudice before, but never so blatantly, never so publicly. A middle-aged man in an expensive suit had taken out his phone and appeared to be recording the scene. "This is going to go viral," he chuckled to his companion. "Kid caught trying to use a stolen credit card." Zora felt tears welling in her eyes, but she fought them back, remembering her father's words about maintaining dignity, even in the face of injustice. "Stand tall, butterfly," he'd told her countless times. "Never let them see you break." "The card belongs to my father," she repeated, her voice starting to waver despite her best efforts. "If you would just check the account, you'd see I'm telling the truth." Officer Wilson placed a heavy hand on her shoulder. "Come along now. We'll call your parents and clear this up." Amber smirked from behind her desk. "If we can find them. Who knows where she really came from?" The comment drew scattered laughter from some of the onlookers. Zora felt a tear escape despite her resolve tracking silently down her cheek. The public humiliation was overwhelming. She stood, frozen, clutching Professor Einstein, as if the stuffed bear could somehow shield her from the cruelty surrounding her. A commotion near the back of the lobby drew everyone's attention. A distinguished-looking man in his 50s emerged from an office marked branch manager. His silver hair and tailored suit exuded authority as he approached the gathered crowd with an annoyed expression. "What's going on out here? I can hear the disruption from my office." Brandon hurried over to intercept him. "Mr. Coleman, sir. We have a situation with a minor who wandered in unattended. She has possession of a high-level credit card that obviously isn't hers. We're attempting to contact her guardians." Richard Coleman surveyed the scene with obvious irritation, his eyes landing dismissively on Zora before turning back to Brandon. "And this requires half my staff and a crowd of customers, because—" Brandon lowered his voice, though not enough to prevent Zora from hearing. "She's claiming to be the daughter of some CEO, says she needs to wire $6 million. Obviously making things up, but she has a black elite card that must belong to someone important." Richard raised an eyebrow, finally giving Zora his full attention. His gaze was cold and assessing, taking in her simple dress-worn sneakers and the well-loved teddy bear clutched against her chest. Nothing about her appearance suggested wealth or importance. His lips curved into a condescending smile as he approached her. "Hello there. I'm Mr. Coleman, the branch manager. I understand you've been telling quite a story to my staff." His tone was the same one might use when humoring a child's elaborate fantasy. Zora straightened her spine, gathering every ounce of composure she could muster. "It's not a story, sir. My name is Zora Johnson. My father is Marcus Johnson, CEO of SecureNet Global. He sent me here to complete an important wire transfer because his banking app wasn't working properly this morning." Richard's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened. "SecureNet Global, you say? The cybersecurity company." When Zora nodded, he continued, "And your father, this CEO, sent a child to handle a multi-million-dollar transaction. Do I have that right?" There was no mistaking the skepticism in his voice. "Yes, sir. The transfer needs to be completed before noon today." Richard glanced at his watch, then back at Zora. "It's nearly 11. Cutting it rather close for such an important transaction, wouldn't you say?" He was toying with her now, and the crowd was eating it up. Several people chuckled at his obvious disbelief. "My father had an emergency board meeting," Zora explained, her voice small but steady. "Our driver Thomas is waiting outside, but he injured his knee and couldn't come in with me." Richard nodded with exaggerated patience. "Of course, the emergency board meeting, and the driver with the injured knee. How convenient that no adults could accompany you into the bank." He turned to the security guard. "Officer Wilson, perhaps you could step outside and look for this mysterious driver." The guard nodded and headed toward the exit. Richard turned back to Zora, his expression hardening. "Young lady, I don't know where you got this card or why you've concocted this elaborate story, but banking is a serious business. We don't have time for games here." Zora felt her last shred of hope fading. "It's not a game. If you would just check the account, you'd see my father has an account here. He told me to ask for Miss Catherine if there was any trouble." At the mention of this name, Richard's expression flickered briefly. "Catherine Williams, our corporate accounts executive. I don't know her title," Zora admitted. "My father just said to ask for Catherine." Richard studied her for a moment, then made a show of sighing heavily. "Very well. Just to put this matter to rest, I'll check the account myself." He held out his hand. "The card, please." Brandon handed over the platinum card, and Richard examined it with obvious skepticism. "I'll be back momentarily," he announced to the crowd before walking toward his office. The next few minutes were excruciating for Zora. Left standing in the middle of the lobby with all eyes on her, she heard the whispers and judgments continuing around her. "Poor thing must be troubled," one woman remarked. "Where are the parents?" another wondered aloud. "Someone should call child services," suggested a third. Officer Wilson returned from outside. "No sign of any driver," he reported loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Check the entire block." Zora knew this was another lie. Thomas was parked directly across from the bank entrance, exactly where he'd dropped her off. Either the guard hadn't actually looked, or he'd deliberately ignored the black man sitting in the sedan. Richard Coleman returned his expression unreadable as he approached Zora. For a brief moment she felt a surge of hope. Surely he'd verified her father's account and would now apologize for the misunderstanding. Instead, he spoke loudly enough for the entire lobby to hear. "Well, young lady, it seems we have a problem. While there is indeed a Marcus Johnson with an account at this bank, the account doesn't match what you've described. It certainly doesn't have the kind of balance that would allow for a $6 million transfer." Zora stared at him in shock. This couldn't be true. Her father had billions. "That's not possible," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Richard smiled coldly. "I'll tell you what. I'll pay double if you have a balance that high in this bank." The crowd erupted in laughter at what they perceived as a clever retort to an imaginative child. The humiliation was complete. Tears streamed freely down Zora's face, now her small shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Richard seemed to realize he might have gone too far in mocking a child publicly. He softened his tone slightly. "Now, let's get serious. We need to contact your actual parents or guardians. What's your real name, and where do you live?" Through her tears, Zora managed to respond. "I told you the truth. My name is Zora Johnson. My father is Marcus Johnson." Richard's brief moment of compassion evaporated. "Very well. If you insist on continuing with this fabrication, we'll need to take additional measures. Officer Wilson, please escort her to my office while we contact the authorities." The mention of authorities sent a fresh wave of panic through Zora. "Please," she begged, "just check the account again. The transfer information is all here." She tried to pull the folded paper from her pocket, but Richard held up his hand. "That's enough. I've already checked, and I won't be made a fool of in my own bank." What Zora couldn't know was that Richard had indeed found Marcus Johnson's account in the system. But instead of acknowledging the truth, his disbelief had led him to assume there must be some error. The Marcus Johnson, he found, couldn't possibly be the father of this small black girl in worn sneakers. The account was flagged as ultra-high net worth with special handling instructions and security protocols. Such accounts typically belong to celebrities, foreign dignitaries, or major corporate executives who rarely visited the branch in person. Rather than accepting that Zora might be telling the truth, Richard had convinced himself that either there was a system error or perhaps another Marcus Johnson with a much smaller account that wasn't showing up properly in his quote, search. This cognitive dissonance prevented him from seeing what was right in front of him. "Brandon, escort her to my office," Richard instructed. "And someone try calling the number associated with this card. There must be an adult somewhere who's missing it." As Brandon moved to lead Zora away, she hugged Professor Einstein tighter, feeling utterly defeated. The stuffed bear with its hidden recording device had captured every moment of her humiliation. What none of the smug, dismissive adults surrounding her could possibly know was just how drastically their lives were about to change. Just as Brandon placed his hand on Zora's shoulder to guide her away, the grand entrance doors of Piedmont National Bank swung open. A well-dressed white family walked in, father in a tailored suit, mother in designer clothes, and their 8-year-old son in pressed khakis and a button-down shirt. The transformation in Richard Coleman was instantaneous and jarring. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitman," he called out immediately, abandoning Zora to stride across the marble floor with his hand extended. "What a pleasure to see you today." The contrast couldn't have been more stark. The same man who had publicly humiliated Zora moments earlier was now practically bowing before this family. "Richard, good to see you, Mr." Whitman replied casually, shaking the manager's hand. "Tyler here wants to deposit his birthday money. Thought we'd make an event of it, teach him about banking." Richard beamed at the boy. "That's wonderful. Financial education is so important for young people. How much are we depositing today, Tyler?" The boy puffed out his chest proudly. $20 from Grandma. 20 whole dollars, Richard exclaimed, as if it were 20,000. "Well, that deserves the VIP treatment. Let me personally help you with this important transaction." Zora watched the scene unfold with a clarity that belied her 7 years. The boy was close to her age, dressed similarly in casual but neat clothes, yet his experience was worlds apart from her own. No one had questioned his presence or doubted his purpose. No one had accused him of stealing or threatened to call authorities. The only difference was the color of their skin. In that moment, something shifted inside Zora. The tears stopped flowing as a new emotion took their place: determination. She thought of Professor Einstein nestled in her arms, remembering the recording device her father had installed inside. Silently, she pressed the small button on the bear's paw, ensuring that everything happening was being documented. While Richard personally escorted the Whitman family to a teller window, Brandon remained with Zora, his hand still on her shoulder. "Let's go to Mr. Coleman's office now," he said, his tone falsely pleasant. Zora stood her ground. "No." The firmness in her voice seemed to surprise Brandon. "Excuse me," I said, "no. I need to complete my father's wire transfer, and I need to do it now." Her voice carried across the lobby, drawing attention back to her. Richard glanced over in annoyance from where he was helping Tyler make his deposit. Brandon tightened his grip slightly on Zora's shoulder. "This isn't up for debate. Either you come willingly, or Officer Wilson will have to help you." Zora straightened her spine and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "I am Zora Johnson, daughter of Marcus Johnson. I have every right to be in this bank and to access my father's account. What you're doing is discrimination, and it's illegal." The adult vocabulary and confident delivery momentarily stunned Brandon, whose grip slackened in surprise. Richard hurriedly finished with the Whitman family and marched back toward Zora, his face flushed with anger at being challenged publicly by a child. "That's quite enough," he hissed. "One more word, and I'm calling Child Services." Zora's gaze shifted upward past Richard to a balcony overlooking the main lobby. A woman in a tailored suit was watching the scene with evident concern. Their eyes met briefly before the woman turned and disappeared from view. "I want to speak to Catherine Williams," Zora announced, remembering the name her father had mentioned. Richard's eyes narrowed. "How do you know Catherine?" "My father told me to ask for her if there were any problems. He said she's helped him many times." Something in Zora's unwavering certainty must have finally penetrated Richard's stubborn disbelief. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded curtly to Brandon. "Watch her. Don't let her leave the lobby." He strode away toward an elevator at the back of the hall. As they waited, Zora became aware of shifting attitudes among the onlookers. Some still stared with judgment or amusement, but others seemed less certain. The elderly woman who had made the racist comment earlier was now watching with a furrowed brow, perhaps wondering if she'd been too quick to judge. The man who had been recording had lowered his phone, his expression troubled. Minutes passed in tense silence before Richard returned with a woman Zora recognized from the balcony. She was in her late 30s with a sleek bob and intelligent eyes that assessed the situation quickly. "This is Catherine Williams," our corporate banking executive Richard introduced her with obvious reluctance. "Catherine, this young lady claims to be the daughter of Marcus Johnson." Zora interjected, looking directly at Catherine. "My father said you've helped him many times." Catherine knelt to Zora's level, her expression neither dismissive nor overly friendly, but professional and measured. "What's your name?" she asked quietly. "Zora Johnson." "And what are you trying to do here today, Zora?" "My father needs to wire $6 million to Quantum Innovations for a business acquisition. His banking app wasn't working this morning, and he had an emergency board meeting. He gave me his card and all the transfer information." Catherine's eyes widened slightly at the mention of the company name. She stood and turned to Richard. "I need to verify some information. We should continue this conversation privately." Richard nodded, seeming relieved to remove the spectacle from public view. "My office is available." Catherine shook her head. "No, I think the conference room would be more appropriate." She turned to Zora with a gentler expression. "Would you come with me, please? We'll sort this out." For the first time since entering the bank, Zora felt a glimmer of hope. She nodded and followed Catherine, still clutching Professor Einstein and his hidden record of everything that had transpired. The conference room was on the second floor, a sleek space with glass walls that offered a view of the lobby below. Catherine closed the door and indicated for Zora to take a seat at the large table. Richard and Brandon followed them in their expressions tense. "Richard, I need to see the card," Catherine said, her tone businesslike. He handed over the platinum card with evident reluctance. Catherine examined it carefully, then looked at Zora. "I'm going to ask you some security questions, Zora. These are questions only someone authorized on the account would know the answers to. Is that okay?" Zora nodded confidently. "Yes, ma'am." "What is the security word associated with this account?" "Butterfly." Zora answered without hesitation. Catherine's expression remained neutral, but her eyes registered surprise. "What was the last major transaction on this account prior to today?" "A wire transfer of $12 million to Nexus Technologies on Tuesday, October 28th. Catherine typed something into a tablet she'd brought with her. She looked up, her expression shifting subtly. "And what is your father's middle name?" "Ellison, after the author Ralph Ellison." Catherine set down her tablet and looked directly at Richard. "She's answered everything correctly." Richard's face paled slightly. "That's not possible. There must be some mistake." "No mistake," Catherine replied firmly. "I need to verify some additional information. Would you both excuse us for a moment?" She nodded toward the door, clearly dismissing Richard and Brandon from their own conference room. Richard began to protest, but Catherine cut him off. "This is a high-priority client account, Richard. I need to follow proper protocols." The two men reluctantly left the room, though they remained visible through the glass walls, watching with evident anxiety. Once they were alone, Catherine turned to Zora with a completely transformed expression, one of concern and growing alarm. "Zora, I am so sorry for what happened downstairs. Your father is indeed a valued client of this bank." Zora's shoulders relaxed slightly at this first acknowledgement that she'd been telling the truth all along. "Then you'll help me with the wire transfer," Catherine nodded. "I will. But first, can you tell me exactly what happened when you arrived today? How were you treated?" Zora recounted the events in detail, her composure remarkable for a 7-year-old who had endured such humiliation. As she spoke, Catherine's expression grew increasingly troubled. "Zora, what you experienced was completely unacceptable. No client should ever be treated that way, especially not a child." She hesitated, then added, "Your father is one of our most important clients. I've handled his corporate banking needs for years, though usually through his financial team, not in person." She paused, looking genuinely perplexed. "May I ask why he sent you alone today? It's quite unusual. His phone wasn't working, and he had an emergency board meeting. Our driver Thomas brought me, but his knee is injured, so he couldn't come inside. Daddy said the bank staff knew him and would help me." Catherine nodded slowly. "I see. Well, we've clearly failed in that regard today." She glanced at Richard and Brandon, who were still hovering anxiously outside the conference room. "I'm going to make this right, Zora. Let's complete your father's transaction first, and then we'll address what happened here today." For the first time since entering the bank, Zora felt tears of relief rather than humiliation. Someone was finally listening to her. Someone finally believed her. The turning point had arrived, but the full reckoning was still to come. While Catherine excused herself to gather the necessary paperwork for the wire transfer, Zora sat alone in the glass-walled conference room. Through the transparent barriers, she could see Richard and Brandon engaged in a heated discussion, their gestures becoming increasingly agitated as they cast frequent glances in her direction. The revelation that she might indeed be who she claimed to be had clearly thrown them into a panic. Zora stroked Professor Einstein's worn fur, finding comfort in the familiar texture. "We're doing okay, Professor," she whispered to the teddy bear. "Daddy would be proud." A movement in the lobby below caught her attention. Thomas had managed to make his way into the bank, his limp pronounced, as he navigated the marble floor with a cane. Officer Wilson immediately intercepted him, his body language hostile and suspicious. Zora pressed her small hand against the glass, wishing she could somehow help Thomas, who was clearly being subjected to the same prejudice she had endured. Catherine returned a folder of documents in her hand. She followed Zora's gaze to the confrontation below. "Is that someone you know?" she asked. "That's Thomas, our driver," Zora explained. "He brought me here but couldn't come in because of his injured knee. Now he's probably worried because I've been gone so long." Catherine's expression darkened. "Excuse me for a moment." She left the conference room again, this time heading for the staircase that led to the lobby. Zora watched as Catherine approached Officer Wilson and Thomas, her posture authoritative. Whatever she said caused the security guard to step back, his expression shifting from suspicion to uncertainty. Thomas looked up toward the conference room, relief washing over his face when he spotted Zora. Catherine escorted him to the elevator, bypassing Richard, who watched the scene with growing alarm. Minutes later, the conference room door opened to admit Thomas, leaning heavily on his cane, with Catherine supporting his other arm. "Miss Zora," Thomas exclaimed, his voice thick with emotion. "Are you all right? I got worried when you didn't come back to the car." "I'm okay now," Zora assured him, though her eyes told a different story. Thomas turned to Catherine, his expression grave. "What happened here?" Before Catherine could respond, Richard and Brandon entered the room uninvited. Richard's demeanor had undergone a remarkable transformation. Gone was the condescending dismissal, replaced by a transparent attempt at professional courtesy. "Miss Two Williams, perhaps we should discuss this matter privately." Before proceeding, he suggested, his eyes darting nervously between her and Thomas. Catherine's response was cool and measured. "Mr. Coleman, I've verified that this is indeed Zora Johnson, daughter of Marcus Johnson, one of our most valued clients. The fact that she was treated with such disrespect in your branch is a matter of serious concern." Richard paled visibly. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding. If we could just— A misunderstanding." Thomas interrupted, his normally gentle voice hardening. "The security guard you sent told me there was no little girl matching Zora's description in the bank. He suggested I move my car before it was towed. When I insisted on coming inside to look for her, he tried to prevent me from entering." Brandon stepped forward, his desperation evident. "Sir, please understand we have protocols for unaccompanied minors. We were simply trying to ensure everyone's safety." Thomas fixed him with a steady gaze. "Were those same protocols applied to the White family with the little boy who came in to deposit his birthday money?" The question hung in the air, its implication unmistakable. No one had an answer. Catherine cleared her throat. "I've pulled up Mr. Johnson's complete file. In addition to his personal accounts, SecureNet Global maintains its primary corporate banking relationship with us. The combined value of these accounts exceeds $3 billion. Richard swayed slightly, as if physically struck by the information. $3 billion. Additionally, Catherine continued, Mr. Johnson is flagged in our system as a VIP client with specific handling instructions. Those instructions explicitly state that any family member or authorized representative should be given immediate assistance without unnecessary verification procedures." She turned to Zora. Your father's account has a special note that you and your nanny, Mrs. Torres, are authorized to conduct transactions with proper identification and security verification. Zora nodded. Mrs. Torres is visiting her family in Puerto Rico this week. That's why Daddy sent me with Thomas instead. The implications of what had transpired were now impossible to ignore. Richard Brandon and the entire bank staff had racially profiled and humiliated the daughter of one of their most important clients. The silence in the conference room was deafening until Thomas spoke again. "I'd like to call Mr. Johnson now." The panic on Richard's face intensified. "Perhaps we could resolve this internally first." "There's no need to disturb Mr. Johnson during his board meeting. I think we're well past that point," Catherine said firmly. She turned to Zora. "First, let's complete the wire transfer your father sent you to do. Then we can address everything else that happened today." As Catherine guided Zora through the transaction process, Thomas stepped into a corner of the room to make a call. Zora could hear only his side of the conversation, but it was clear her father was now aware that something had gone wrong. "Yes, sir. No, she's physically fine, but—" "I understand, sir. Yes, they're completing the transfer now. I think you should come as soon as possible. Yes, sir, it's that serious." When he ended the call, Thomas's expression was grim. "Your father will be here in 20 minutes, he informed Zora. The wire transfer was completed with 15 minutes to spare before the noon deadline. Catherine handled everything, personally treating Zora with the respect and attention that should have been afforded to her from the moment she entered the bank. Throughout the process, Richard and Brandon hovered nervously, making occasional attempts to ingratiate themselves that fell painfully flat. "Would you like something to drink?" Zora Richard offered at one point, his voice overly solicitous. "Perhaps a soda from our executive lounge." Zora regarded him coolly. "No, thank you." The rejection was polite but firm, and Richard retreated visibly deflated. Officer Wilson appeared at the conference room door. "Mr. Have come, Coleman. There are some executives from regional headquarters in the lobby asking to see you. They say it's urgent." Richard's face lost what little color remained. News was traveling fast, and the gravity of the situation was escalating by the minute. As he hurried out, Catherine turned to Zora with a thoughtful expression. "Zora, can I ask you something? Did you happen to record what happened downstairs?" Zora glanced at Professor Einstein, then back at Catherine. "My teddy bear has a recording device inside. My daddy gave it to me after a teacher was mean to me at preschool. He said it was for protection." Catherine nodded, unsurprised. "Your father is known for his forward thinking in security measures. Would you be willing to let me hear that recording?" Before Zora could respond, Thomas interjected gently. "I think that's something we should discuss with Mr. Johnson present, don't you?" Catherine acknowledged this with a respectful nod. "Of course. I just want to ensure that we have a complete understanding of what transpired." The underlying message was clear. Catherine was positioning herself apart from her colleagues' behavior, perhaps recognizing that the fallout from this incident could be career-ending for those involved. As they waited for Marcus Johnson to arrive, Zora thought about all the times her father had prepared her for a world that might judge her by the color of her skin rather than the content of her character. He had taught her financial literacy, not just for practical reasons, but as a form of armor in a society that would underestimate her. He had given her Professor Einstein with his hidden recorder not out of paranoia but out of painful experience. And yet, for all his preparation, nothing could have fully readied her for the humiliation she had endured today. Have you ever witnessed someone being judged unfairly based solely on appearances? Comment number 1. If you believe Zora showed incredible strength for a 7-year-old in this situation, hit that like button if you're eagerly waiting to see these bank employees face Marcus Johnson after what they did to his daughter. The investigation is deepening, and the truth is coming to light. But how will Zora's father respond when he discovers exactly how his daughter was treated? Will justice be served, or will the bank find a way to sweep this discrimination under the rug? Stay tuned as this powerful story continues. The atmosphere in Piedmont National Bank changed perceptibly at exactly 12:27 p.m. when Marcus Johnson strode through the front doors. At 6'2", with broad shoulders and an impeccable charcoal suit, his presence commanded immediate attention. His closely cropped hair showed distinguished touches of gray at the temples, and his expression was one of controlled fury. He wasn't alone. Behind him followed 3 men and 2 women in business attire, carrying leather portfolios his legal team assembled with remarkable speed. The lobby fell silent. Customers and employees alike stared as the imposing group moved purposefully across the marble floor. Richard Coleman, who had been in a panicked conversation with bank executives near the entrance, turned and froze. His face drained of color, as he recognized Marcus Johnson not from photographs. Marcus was famously private and rarely appeared in media, but from the unmistakable aura of power that surrounded him. "Mr. Seven." Johnson Richard managed to stammer, extending a hand that was pointedly ignored. "We've been expecting you." Marcus didn't break stride. "Where is my daughter?" His voice was quiet but carried an intensity that made everyone in earshot straighten involuntarily. "She's upstairs in our executive conference room," Richard replied, hurrying to keep pace. "I can assure you she's being well taken care of." "Now," Marcus added with deadly calm. The silent addition hung in the air, but not before. They reached the elevator, and Richard fumbled with his keycard to summon it. The legal team exchanged glances, but remained silent, their presence alone communicating the seriousness of the situation. When the elevator doors opened on the 2nd floor, Marcus immediately spotted Zora through the glass walls of the conference room. His stern expression softened momentarily, then hardened again as he noted her red-rimmed eyes and the protective way she clutched Professor Einstein. He moved swiftly to the conference room, his team following like a wake behind a battleship. When the door opened, Zora looked up and launched herself toward her father. "Daddy." Marcus knelt and gathered her into his arms, holding her tightly for a long moment before pulling back to examine her face. "Are you okay, Butterfly?" he asked, his voice gentle. Zora nodded, though tears threatened again. "I did the transfer," she said proudly. "Before noon, just like you needed." Marcus smiled, the expression transforming his severe features. "I never doubted you would." He stood, keeping one hand protectively on Zora's shoulder as he surveyed the room. His gaze passed over Richard and Brandon with cold dismissal before settling on Catherine, Miss Williams. She stepped forward and extended her hand. "Yes, Mr. Johnson. I'm Catherine Williams, corporate banking executive. I assisted Zora with completing the wire transfer." Marcus shook her hand briefly. "Thank you for helping my daughter." His gaze shifted to Thomas, who stood leaning on his cane. "Thomas, are you all right?" "I'm fine, sir," Thomas assured him. "Just sorry I couldn't be inside sooner." Marcus nodded, understanding the subtext. He turned back to the room at large. "I'd like to hear exactly what happened here today." There was a moment of uncomfortable silence before Richard stepped forward with a nervous smile. "Mr. Johnson, there appears to have been an unfortunate misunderstanding. Rest assured not from you." Marcus interrupted his tone, making it clear he wasn't interested in sanitized explanations. "Zora, can you tell me what happened when you came into the bank?" All eyes turned to the 7-year-old, who straightened her shoulders and began recounting the events of the morning with remarkable composure. She described the dismissive treatment by Amber, the condescending attitude of Brandon, and the public humiliation orchestrated by Richard. As she spoke, the faces of the bank employees grew increasingly pale. When she reached the part about Richard saying, "I'll pay double if you have a balance that high in this bank," one of Marcus's lawyers made a note in her portfolio, her expression grim. Marcus listened without interruption, his face becoming more stoic with each detail. When Zora finished, he turned to Thomas. "Do you have anything to add?" Thomas described his own experience with Officer Wilson and how he had been prevented from entering the bank to check on Zora. Finally, Marcus looked at Catherine. "And your involvement, Miss Williams?" Catherine explained how she had noticed the commotion from her office overlooking the lobby and eventually intervened. "I want to be clear, Mr. Johnson, that what happened today was completely unacceptable and contrary to our bank's policies. Once I verified Zora's identity, I took immediate steps to complete the transaction and inform senior management." Marcus nodded, then turned to Zora. "Professor Einstein was with you the whole time." Zora nodded, understanding the real question. "Yes, Daddy. I turned him on when they wouldn't believe me. Marcus held out his hand, and Zora passed him the teddy bear. With practiced movements, he accessed a hidden compartment in the stuffed animal's back and removed a small digital recorder. The bank employees watched with growing horror as they realized what was happening. Marcus connected the device to his phone, tapped a few commands, and then placed it on the conference table. The recording began to play, filling the room with the unmistakable sounds of the bank lobby and Amber's dismissive voice. "The children's play area is in the corner by the restrooms, sweetie." As the recording continued, documenting every dismissive comment, every racist insinuation, and every moment of humiliation that Zora had endured, the expressions around the room transformed. The legal team took notes furiously. Catherine closed her eyes, briefly wincing at particularly egregious moments. Richard Brandon and the other bank representatives seemed to physically shrink with each damning minute. When the elderly woman's voice came through clearly, "I wonder which household she works for. She probably took that card from her mother's employer while cleaning their house." Marcus paused the recording. "Would someone like to explain to me why a customer was allowed to make openly racist remarks about my daughter without any intervention from staff?" No one answered. Marcus resumed the recording. When it reached Richard's mocking challenge, "I'll pay double if you have a balance that high in this bank," followed by the eruption of laughter from the crowd. Marcus stopped the recording again. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus stood perfectly still, his gaze fixed on Richard. "Mr. Coleman, do you have any explanation for your behavior today?" Richard's professional facade had crumbled entirely. "Mr. Johnson the First, we had no way of knowing. She didn't look like." "What I mean is, she didn't look like she could possibly be the daughter of a wealthy man Marcus finished for him, because she's black." Richard flinched but couldn't deny the accusation. Marcus turned to address everyone in the room. "Let me introduce myself properly, since it seems there's some confusion about who I am. My name is Marcus Ellison Johnson. I founded SecureNet Global 15 years ago in my garage apartment. Today, it's the third largest cybersecurity firm in the world, valued at over $12 billion. I personally hold $4 billion in assets, of which nearly $3 billion are managed through this bank." He paused, letting the information sink in. "More relevantly, I am Zora's father. The man you treated as a potential accomplice in some imagined crime is Thomas Washington, who has been with our family for 5 years and is more trustworthy than anyone I've met in this building today." One of the regional executives who had been silent until now stepped forward. "Mr. Johnson, on behalf of Piedmont National Bank, I want to extend our deepest apologies for this inexcusable incident. I assure you that appropriate actions will be taken immediately." Marcus's expression remained unchanged, including the executive straightened. "Immediate administrative leave for all staff involved, pending a full investigation and a comprehensive review of our policies regarding client verification and treatment." Marcus turned to his legal team. "Miss Chen, your thoughts?" The lead attorney spoke crisply. "The recording documents clear violations of multiple banking regulations, discriminatory treatment, and potential defamation. There are grounds for significant legal action, should you wish to pursue it." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, then looked down at Zora, who had remained quietly by his side throughout the confrontation. "What do you think, Butterfly? What should happen now?" The room fell silent as everyone turned to the 7-year-old. Zora considered the question seriously, her young face showing wisdom beyond her years. "I think," she said slowly, "that they should learn from this, so they don't do it to someone else who doesn't have a daddy like mine to help them." Marcus smiled with pride, then turned back to the bank representatives with renewed seriousness. "My daughter, in her wisdom, has identified the real issue here. What happened to Zora today wasn't an isolated incident or a simple misunderstanding. It was the predictable result of systemic biases that your institution has failed to address." He gestured to Thomas. "If a distinguished black man with gray hair cannot enter your bank without being treated with suspicion, if a black child cannot conduct legitimate business without being accused of theft, then the problem goes far beyond a few individuals making poor decisions." The regional executive nodded soberly. "We understand, Mr. Johnson, and we're committed to addressing these issues at all levels," Good Marcus replied. "Because I was planning to move SecureNet Global's entire banking operation to this branch next month. That would have meant over $20 billion in annual transactions flowing through your institution." The use of past tense wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Richard looked as though he might faint. "Mr. Johnson, please reconsider. We can make this right." Marcus's expression remained impassive. "Can you?" "Let's start with a simple question. The card my daughter presented today is a Black Elite card issued to fewer than 1,000 clients nationwide. Did any of your staff even attempt to verify its authenticity before assuming it was stolen?" The uncomfortable silence was answer enough. "That's what I thought," Marcus said quietly. "My legal team will be in touch regarding next steps. In the meantime, I'll be taking my daughter home." He turned to Catherine. "Miss Williams, thank you again for your assistance today. Your professionalism stands in stark contrast to what my daughter experienced initially." Catherine nodded, clearly aware of how close she had come to being swept up in the coming storm. As Marcus prepared to leave with Zora and Thomas, Richard made one last desperate attempt. "Mr. Johnson, please, what can we do to make this right?" Marcus paused at the door, his expression thoughtful. "Mr. Syme, Coleman, you offered to pay double if my account had the balance," Zora claimed. "I suggest you honor that commitment not to me, but to organizations working to combat financial discrimination in banking. It would be a start." With that, he guided Zora and Thomas out of the conference room, his legal team following behind. As they crossed the lobby now filled with curious onlookers and whispered conversations, Zora walked tall beside her father. The same people who had laughed at her hours earlier now stared in awe and mounting mortification as the truth of her identity became clear. Outside the bank, as they approached the cars waiting at the curb, Marcus knelt again to Zora's level. "I am so proud of you, Butterfly. You showed incredible courage today." Zora's smile was tentative. "I was scared, but I remembered what you taught me about standing tall." Marcus hugged her close. "You did exactly right. And what happened today wasn't your fault. It was never about you. It was about their assumptions and prejudices." As they drove away from Piedmont National Bank, neither of them could know exactly how far-reaching the consequences of this day would be. But one thing was, certain things would never be the same. Not for the bank, not for the Johnson family, and not for Zora, whose innocent trip to complete a simple transaction had become a powerful lesson about the world she lived in. News of the incident at Piedmont National Bank spread like wildfire. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, Marcus Johnson's legal team had delivered formal notices of potential litigation to the bank's headquarters. By 5, all major executives had been summoned to an emergency meeting. By 7, Richard Coleman, Brandon Wells, Amber Nichols, and Officer Wilson had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. But the consequences were just beginning. In the Johnson home that evening, Marcus sat with Zora in their cozy living room. The house, modest by billionaire standards, reflected Marcus's determination to raise his daughter with values rather than extravagance. "How are you feeling, Butterfly?" he asked, studying her face for signs of lingering distress. Zora considered the question thoughtfully. "I feel different, like I understand something important now." Marcus nodded, a mixture of sadness and pride in his eyes. "I wish you hadn't had to learn it this way." He had spent years trying to protect her from the harsh realities of racism, teaching her to be proud and confident while shielding her from the worst of society's prejudices. Today had shattered that protection in the most public and humiliating way possible. Was it because, "I'm black, Daddy, is that why they didn't believe me?" The directness of her question made his heart ache. "Yes, Butterfly, that was a big part of it. They made assumptions about you based on what you look like, not who you are." Zora was quiet for a moment. The white boy with the $20. They were so nice to him. "I know. But we have billions of dollars," she said, confusion evident in her voice. "And they still treated us badly." Marcus sighed, searching for words to explain the complex realities of privilege and prejudice to a 7-year-old. "Money doesn't always protect us from racism, Butterfly. Sometimes it can even make people more resentful or disbelieving." They have a fixed idea in their minds about who can be wealthy, and when reality doesn't match that idea, they'd rather believe their prejudice than what's right in front of them. The doorbell rang, interrupting their conversation. Thomas, who had insisted on staying despite Marcus's suggestion he rest his injured knee at home, went to answer it. He returned moments later with Catherine Williams. "Miss Williams is here to see you, sir," Thomas announced formally, though his expression suggested skepticism about the visitor. Marcus raised an eyebrow but gestured for Catherine to enter the living room. She stood awkwardly clutching a leather portfolio. "Mr. Johnson, I apologize for coming to your home unannounced. I felt it was important to speak with you directly away from the bank." Marcus nodded toward a chair. "Have a seat." "Zora, would you like to stay or go to your room?" "Stay," Zora said firmly, moving closer to her father on the sofa. Catherine sat, her professional composure slightly cracked by the gravity of the situation. "First, I want to personally apologize to both of you. What happened today was inexcusable." Marcus's expression remained neutral. Apology noted. "I assume the bank sent you." Catherine shook her head. "No. In fact, they don't know I'm here. I came because I believe you deserve to know exactly what's happening inside Piedmont National in the wake of today's events." This caught Marcus's attention. "Go on." "The regional executives are in full damage control mode. They've suspended the employees involved, as you know, but they're also trying to minimize the potential financial impact by keeping the incident as quiet as possible." She opened her portfolio and removed several documents. "These are internal communications from this afternoon. They show that the bank's strategy is to offer you a substantial settlement with aggressive non-disclosure terms attached." Marcus wasn't surprised. Standard corporate crisis management. Bury the problem under money and legal silence. "Yes, but there's more." Catherine hesitated, then continued. "Richard Coleman has already been offered a generous severance package in exchange for taking full responsibility and signing his own NDA. They're positioning this as the actions of a few bad employees rather than addressing the systemic issues you identified." Zora, who had been listening intently, spoke up. "So nothing really changes, they just pay money and pretend it never happened." Catherine looked at the child with newfound respect. "That's their hope, yes." Marcus studied Catherine thoughtfully. "Why are you telling us this? You're risking your career." Catherine straightened her shoulders. "Because what happened today was wrong, and covering it up is equally wrong. I've worked at Piedmont for 12 years, and I've seen patterns of discriminatory treatment that were always dismissed as isolated incidents. Today made me realize I can't be complicit any longer." She placed the documents on the coffee table. "These might be useful to your legal team. And for what it's worth, I've submitted a formal report documenting everything I observed today, including details of previous similar incidents. If my employment is terminated as a result, so be it." Marcus's expression softened slightly. "That takes courage." "Not compared to what Zora showed today," Catherine replied, glancing at the child with genuine admiration. The doorbell rang again. This time Thomas returned with a regional executive from the bank, accompanied by a man Marcus recognized as the bank's chief legal counsel. Marcus sighed. "It seems we're popular this evening." The executive, a silver-haired man named James Harrington, appeared momentarily startled to see Catherine already there. "Miss Williams, I wasn't aware you'd be joining us." His tone made it clear this was an unwelcome surprise. "I wasn't aware you'd be coming either, Mr. Harrington," Catherine replied evenly. Harrington quickly recovered, turning to Marcus with a practiced expression of contrition. "Mr. Johnson, thank you for seeing us. We wanted to personally express our deepest regrets about today's unfortunate incident." Marcus remained seated, making no move to offer his visitors chairs. "Incident. That's an interesting word for what happened to my daughter." Harrington had the grace to look uncomfortable. "A terrible situation that never should have occurred. We've taken immediate action against the employees responsible, and we're prepared to make amends in whatever way you deem appropriate." The lawyer beside him opened his briefcase, removing a document folder. "We've prepared some options for your consideration." Marcus's expression hardened. "Before we discuss options, I'd like to hear exactly what actions you've taken beyond suspending a few employees. Harrington cleared his throat. We've initiated a comprehensive review of our client verification procedures. We're also planning to implement additional staff training on implicit bias and customer service protocols. Planning to implement, Marcus repeated. Not implementing now, planning to at some undefined future point. Harrington shifted uncomfortably. These things take time to develop properly. And in the meantime, how many other black customers will face the same treatment my daughter experienced today? Marcus cut in. How many others have already endured it without the resources to fight back? The lawyer intervened smoothly. Mr. Johnson, we understand your concerns. That's why we're prepared to offer substantial compensation as an immediate good faith gesture while longer-term changes are developed. He slid the folder across the coffee table. This offer includes full coverage of any emotional distress damages, along with a significant donation to a charitable organization of your choosing. Marcus didn't touch the folder. And in exchange, standard confidentiality provisions, the lawyer replied. Nothing unusual. Zora, who had been quietly observing the exchange, suddenly spoke. You want us to take money, to not tell anyone what happened. Her direct assessment made the bank representatives visibly uncomfortable. The lawyer attempted a friendly smile. It's more about allowing everyone to move forward positively without unnecessary public controversy. Marcus placed a protective arm around Zora's shoulders. My daughter was publicly humiliated today. Customers and employees alike witnessed her being treated like a criminal for trying to access an account that holds billions of dollars. And now you want to ensure that the public narrative of what happened remains under your control. He shook his head. That's not moving forward positively. That's sweeping discrimination under the rug. Harrington leaned forward earnestly. Mr. Johnson, we're prepared to be extremely generous. The figure in that folder is $20 million, plus the charitable donation. For a moment, the room was silent. Then Marcus laughed a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. You think $20 million is significant to me. You've seen my accounts. You know what my net worth is. It's not about the money for you, we understand, that Harrington backpedaled quickly. It's about making a meaningful gesture that acknowledges the seriousness of the situation. Marcus stood, signaling that the conversation was nearing its end. If you want to make a meaningful gesture, start by implementing immediate, transparent changes to how your institution addresses racial bias. Create accountability systems that don't rely on victims having the resources to fight back. Establish genuine consequences for discriminatory behavior at every level. He gestured toward the door. When you have a real plan for those changes, not vague promises of future training, then we can talk again. The bank representatives exchanged glances, clearly unprepared for this response. The lawyer made one last attempt. Mr. Johnson, while your suggestions have merit, we hope you'll reconsider our offer. Legal proceedings can be lengthy and stressful for everyone involved, especially children. His gaze shifted meaningfully to Zora. Marcus's expression darkened at the implied threat. Are you suggesting that pursuing justice would somehow harm my daughter more than the discrimination she already experienced in your bank? The lawyer paled. Not at all, I simply meant I think we're done here, Marcus interrupted firmly. Thomas will show you out. After they had gone, only Catherine remained. She stood gathering her portfolio. I should go as well. Thank you for seeing me. Marcus stopped her. Miss Williams, why did you really come here tonight? The documents are helpful, but you could have sent those anonymously. Catherine hesitated, then answered honestly. Because I needed Zora to see that not everyone at the bank was willing to pretend this didn't happen, that some of us were genuinely sorry and wanted to make real changes. She turned to Zora directly. What happened to you today was wrong, and I'm so sorry I didn't intervene sooner. Your courage has made me realize I need to be braver too. Zora studied her for a moment, then nodded solemnly. Thank you for helping me with the wire transfer. You're welcome, Catherine replied with a small smile. You did a perfect job with it, by the way. Most adults couldn't have handled those details as well as you did. After Catherine left, Marcus sat back down with Zora. What are you thinking, Butterfly? Zora was quiet for a moment, her young face serious. I think most people won't ever get offered $20 million when something bad happens to them. Marcus nodded, impressed by her insight. That's very true, so we need to help them too, not just ourselves. Marcus hugged her close, his heart swelling with pride. That's exactly what we're going to do. By the next morning, news of the incident had leaked to the media despite the bank's efforts at containment. Marcus's refusal to accept a private settlement had forced Piedmont National to address the situation publicly. As cameras gathered outside the bank headquarters, Marcus prepared for a press conference that would transform a private humiliation into a catalyst for systemic change. 1 month after the incident at Piedmont National Bank, Zora Johnson sat in her father's home office, swinging her legs as she watched him sign the final documents, creating the Johnson Financial Literacy Foundation. The foundation would focus on providing financial education to underserved communities, with a special emphasis on preparing children of color to navigate financial institutions with confidence and knowledge. "Is it official now?" Daddy Zora asked as Marcus set down his pen. He smiled at her. "It's official, Butterfly, and you're the honorary chairperson just like you wanted." The foundation was just one of many changes that had blossomed from the seeds of that painful day. In the weeks following the incident, Marcus had made a series of decisions that transformed both their lives and the landscape of banking in Atlanta. His refusal to accept Piedmont National's settlement offer and subsequent press conference had ignited a firestorm of public discussion about racial discrimination in financial services. Other black customers of Piedmont National and similar institutions had come forward with their own stories, creating a movement that demanded substantive change rather than symbolic gestures. The bank had been forced to implement immediate reforms under intense public and regulatory scrutiny. Richard Coleman, Brandon Wells, and Amber Nichols had been terminated, with Richard facing additional professional consequences after an independent investigation revealed a pattern of discriminatory practices under his management. Catherine Williams had been promoted to branch manager, tasked with rebuilding the bank's reputation through genuine community engagement and equitable service. Perhaps most significantly, Marcus had decided to become more public about his success and position. After years of maintaining a low profile, he recognized that his visibility could provide important representation and inspiration. "Seeing someone who looks like you succeeding matters," he explained to Zora. "I thought I was protecting you by keeping our wealth private, but maybe I was missing an opportunity to show other black children what's possible." The doorbell rang, interrupting their moment of celebration. Thomas showed in an unexpected visitor, Richard Coleman. Marcus's expression hardened, but Zora placed a small hand on his arm. "It's okay, Daddy. I want to hear what he has to say." Richard stood awkwardly in the doorway, a changed man from the arrogant bank manager of a month ago. His designer suit had been replaced by more modest attire, and the confident posture had given way to a humbled stance. "Mr. Johnson, Zora, thank you for agreeing to see me. I know I'm the last person you want in your home." Marcus nodded coolly. "What can we do for you, Mr. Coleman?" Richard took a deep breath. "I came to apologize in person. Not for the bank, not as part of any legal strategy, but as a human being who treated another human being, a child, with incredible cruelty and prejudice." He turned to Zora. "I've spent the past month reflecting on my behavior that day and throughout my career. There's no excuse for how I treated you, and I am deeply, truly sorry." Zora studied him thoughtfully. "Did you lose your job?" Richard nodded. "Yes, and deservedly so, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I need to acknowledge the harm I caused and take responsibility for it." "Are you sorry because you got caught, or because of what you did?" Zora asked, the directness of a child cutting through to the heart of the matter. Richard blinked, clearly surprised by the question. "At first I was just sorry I got caught," he admitted, after a pause. "But as days passed, I couldn't stop thinking about the look on your face when I mocked you in front of everyone. No child should ever be made to feel that way. So now I'm sorry for what I did, regardless of the consequences to me." Zora considered this, then looked up at her father before responding. "I accept your apology, Mr. Coleman, but accepting it doesn't mean what you did was okay." Richard nodded solemnly. "I understand. Thank you for your grace, Zora. It's more than I deserve." As he turned to leave, Zora called after him. "Mr. Coleman, what are you going to do now?" He paused. "I'm not sure yet, but I've enrolled in some courses on racial equity, and I'm volunteering with a community financial literacy program. I have a lot to learn, and even more to make amends for." After he left, Marcus looked at his daughter with pride and wonder. "You continue to amaze me, Butterfly. Your capacity for forgiveness is extraordinary." Zora shrugged. "Being angry forever wouldn't help me. Besides, now he might help other kids instead of hurting them." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "That's wisdom beyond your years." In the weeks that followed, the changes continued to unfold. Marcus implemented new hiring practices at SecureNet Global that specifically addressed unconscious bias and created pathways for underrepresented groups in tech. The company's public profile rose as Marcus began speaking openly about both cybersecurity and the importance of diversity in the industry. Piedmont National Bank, under pressure from regulators, and the public instituted comprehensive reforms. Training on racial bias became mandatory for all employees. Customer verification protocols were standardized to eliminate subjective judgment. Most significantly, the bank established a new policy of doubling initial deposits for young customers from underserved communities, a direct reference to Richard's mocking promise to Zora. 3 months after the incident, Zora walked into Piedmont National Bank again. This time, she was there to make her first independent deposit into a new account Marcus had opened in her name. Catherine Williams greeted her personally at the door. "Good afternoon, Miss Johnson. Welcome to Piedmont National." The lobby looked different now. The staff was visibly more diverse, and a large photograph of Zora and Marcus hung prominently on one wall alongside a plaque describing the bank's commitment to equitable service for all customers. As Zora completed her transaction, she placed Professor Einstein on the counter. The teddy bear, once a hidden safeguard against discrimination, now served as a silent reminder of how one child's experience had catalyzed institutional change. "Would you like a receipt, Miss Johnson?" the teller asked respectfully. "Yes, please," Zora replied, accepting the paper with a smile. As she walked toward the exit, she passed a black family with a young daughter who was opening her first account. The girl looked at Zora with shy recognition. Her photo on the wall had made her something of a local celebrity. Zora smiled encouragingly. "It's a good bank now," she told the girl. "They'll take good care of you." Outside, Marcus waited by the car. "All done?" he asked as she approached. Zora nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Daddy, do you think things are really different now? Or are they just being nice because they know who I am?" Marcus considered her question seriously. Both probably. Real change takes time and constant vigilance. But what happened to you has made a difference for many others, and that matters. Zora looked back at the bank. "Someday, I hope all kids get treated with respect, not just because their parents are important or because someone's watching." Marcus hugged her close. "That's what we're working toward, Butterfly. And thanks to you, we're closer to that day than we were before." As they drove away from Piedmont National Bank, Zora thought about everything that had changed since that terrible day 3 months ago. The humiliation had been real and painful, but from it had grown new opportunities, new awareness, and new beginnings for many people beyond just herself. One day she hoped respect wouldn't depend on wealth or who your parents were. Until then, she would continue learning, growing, and standing tall just as her father had taught her. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination like what Zora experienced? Comment below with your thoughts on how we can all help create a more equitable world for everyone. If this story moved you or made you think differently about everyday discrimination, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more powerful stories that need to be told. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message, and remember that sometimes the smallest voices can create the biggest changes. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I'll see you in the next story. Zora's experience reveals how deeply racial bias is embedded in our institutions and daily interactions. Despite her father's wealth and preparation, Zora faced humiliation because of assumptions based solely on her appearance. This powerful story teaches us that discrimination doesn't disappear with economic status. Wealth may provide resources to fight back, but it doesn't shield Black Americans from prejudice. The bank employee's immediate distrust of Zora demonstrates how quickly people form judgments based on race. The stark contrast between her treatment and that of the white boy with $20 exposes the double standards that persist in our society. Marcus's decision to become more visible as a successful Black entrepreneur highlights the importance of representation. By stepping into the spotlight, he created a pathway for others while showing that silence sometimes perpetuates injustice. Perhaps most importantly, this story reminds us that systemic change requires more than individual consequences. While firing discriminatory employees was necessary, true progress came through policy reforms, education initiatives, and ongoing accountability. Change happens when we address both individual bias and institutional structures that enable discrimination. Zora's wisdom in forgiving Richard, while insisting on real change, embodies the balance we must strike, holding people accountable while creating opportunities for redemption and growth. Her story shows that even painful experiences can become catalysts for transformation when we refuse to accept injustice as inevitable. Has this story touched your heart or opened your eyes to experiences different from your own? I'd love to know if you've ever witnessed or experienced discrimination in places where everyone deserves equal treatment. Comment below with a time when you stood up against bias or how you plan to be an ally for those facing discrimination. Have you ever been underestimated like Zora and proved everyone wrong? If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help it reach others who need to hear this message. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that challenge perspectives and inspire change. And if you know someone who works in customer service or any public-facing role, share this video as a reminder that our assumptions about others can cause real harm. Thank you for being part of a community that believes in dignity and respect for everyone regardless of appearance or background. Together we can create a world where no child faces the treatment that Zora endured.